Hello and welcome to Wednesday of Gifted, Talented and Neurodiverse Awareness Week. And I'm absolutely delighted to be talking about actually gifted adults here with my friend Heather. And I've invited Heather because when I think of gifted adults, I think of Heather. Welcome, Heather.
Thanks for having me.
So when I was thinking about your bio, I was thinking, how can I introduce Heather? And I'm going to say Rubik's Cube addict, total data nerd, especially race car statistics, historian, like, you know, in your part-time, massive local historian, and welder. Like the list kind of goes on. Am I kind of getting that all right?
Yeah. There's all sorts of bits in there. I've done a few different things. Furniture design and woodwork was in there at one stage as well. You know, yep. It's all good fun.
And you're perfectly comfortable with being called the data nerd.
Oh yeah. It's the first line on my CV at the moment.
Absolutely, own it. Oh
yeah.
And so, Heather, welcome, because when I think about the conversation of gifted adults, this tends to be two kinds of adults or gifted adults, and it's those who kind of knew because they were tested as a child, and those of us kind of like myself who had no idea until they kind of went through the journey with their kids. And you're one of the, I have to say, rarer people that I don't meet as many people who actually went through that process as a child. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, it was a couple of weeks after I started school. My mum's been filling in this story for me. A couple of weeks after I started school, my teacher approached my mum and said, I think Heather might be gifted. And sort of this was a sort of bit of a surprise to my mum. She didn't really know what that was all about. And the teacher sort of said, there's nothing that we can really do about it at this stage. There's still the belief that, you know, kids sort of level out by year 3, so we don't sort of intervene until then. She didn't believe that I was going to be one that was going to level out, but this was, there was still nothing sort of to do by that stage. So I just sort of moved along with everyone else. I was invited to join the Gifted and Talented Children's Association a few years later, and you know, this was like an invitation only membership that they had at the time, and my parents chose at that time not to take that up. And I sort of got into, there was a gifted and talented pull-out class that my school had a couple of years after that, and that worked out to about, I don't know, an hour a week or an hour a fortnight, something like that. So it was kind of very small amounts of interaction there. And when I started high school, I think it was after about the first year, some of the teachers had nominated students that they felt might fit the bill, and they were sent to go and sit the OLSAT test. And I was one of those and went through that testing process and did very well by all accounts. And yeah, afterwards the teachers were a bit funny, a bit strange. Oh, what can we do? What can we, you know, what do you need? How can we support you? These kinds of things. And they didn't listen to a word I said. And so they sent me off on a couple of excursions that were being organised again by the Gifted and Talented Children's Association, but not too much sort of happened at school. And yeah, but that was the identification. That was the real sort of testing process that happened. And yeah, here I am, I guess.
That's really interesting. So you were identified quite early, and then you know that you picked up again later on, but it didn't really manifest in any significant or practical change in your education.
Not hugely, no. As I say, they tried to sort of fit in a gifted and talented program at my primary school, and it was odd. in that the classroom teacher had to sort of remember that, oh, it's on today, and, you know, to trigger the child and, you know, tell them to go and all those kinds of things. And my teacher quite frequently would forget. And so I wouldn't make it there. And then on one occasion she did remember and sent me, and I went there and it wasn't there. It just, there was no one in the room, like there was no indication as to where it had gone or whether it had finished. So I just sort of went back to the class and kind of went, it wasn't on. And then that was the end of it. It never happened again. And I don't know what happened.
We may never know.
We may never know. Yeah, but it was very, you know, it was very piecemeal. And yeah, I sort of never got the impression that the classroom teacher was too happy about it.
So how did you find your primary and high school experiences then? Because it doesn't sound like, you know, there was a whole lot of extension or acceleration or enrichment or you know, the kinds of things we might like to see a gifted child access.
It was yeah. I liked academics. I liked, you know, getting into these things and you know, sort of solving math problems and doing those kinds of things. And I was very much the child that, you know, I wanted the teachers to think well of me. I wanted the adults to think well of me, because goodness knows the children didn't. You know, I didn't sort of have those peer relationships with my same age peers. So, you know, that was kind of complex. So I was a very well-behaved child, and I wanted to do these things. I was a voracious reader. My mother would complain that if we were taking a 2-minute car journey, I could not leave without a book. And she's like, how are you going to read? And I'm going to read in the car. And so I read a lot, and I read a lot of fiction about kids. They, you know, they were the protagonists in these stories. And it's a trope in these books that kids don't like school because school is boring. And I'm like, I think school is boring. This is normal. They don't think that it's boring in the same way that I think it's boring. Yeah. So, you know, and so every time when I see parents sort of saying, oh, my child's coming home from school and saying that they're bored, it's like, yeah, but every child comes home from school saying that they're bored. Your child is different, is bored in a different way when they're gifted than when they are sort of, you know, typically developing, because, yeah, is it a boredom of this is not what I want to do, or is it the boredom of I want to do more? And, you know, my boredom was I wanted to do more. I wanted to deep dive. I wanted to really sort of strangle information. I wanted to get into everything, and that's not the same boredom my classmates were experiencing.
And so how did that sort of manifest itself, I guess, as you grew up? Because we often talk a lot about, you know, our gifted kids, when they don't get that challenge early, they don't really learn how to learn. Is this something that you faced?
This was huge. And, you know, my parents, they tried with, it was the music thing, you know, like Lisa Simpson, you know, the best way to encourage a gifted child is a musical instrument. So I had just randomly showed an aptitude for piano. We were at the Royal Adelaide Show, and we walked into the Southern Music stand, and they've got all these pianos on display. And yes, at 7, for some reason, I know they put these little signs on that says do not play the pianos, but for some reason at 7 I decided not to read that. I'd been reading since before I turned 3. Yeah. But this day I did not read the little sign, and I started tapping out Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on the piano. And the piano salesman, who's obviously, like, you know, primed to kind of, you know, predate on parents in these situations. But anyway, he's walked up to my parents and says, oh, how long's she been playing? And my parents looked at one another and went, she doesn't play. She's never had a lesson. This is, you know, she's never done this before. And they're like, you might want to get that one some music lessons. So, you know, they worked on it, and, you know, I got in and I started playing piano, and I was very good at it. And this was a problem. So very quickly I moved from group lessons into private lessons. And even then the teacher was kind of, oh, okay, yep, you've developed this, da, da, da. Okay, so you're going to go home and you're going to practice your music. Okay, sure. Sure. And I go home I'd go home and the piano book would sit, you know, on the piano, and I wouldn't touch it for the week. Or I might get to it for maybe, you know, 10 minutes at some point during the week. And then I'd go to the next lesson and she would say, have you been practicing? And I'd say, yes. And then I would play. And she was convinced that I had been practicing, but I had not. And this went on for years.
Wow.
Then that teacher, you know, I didn't have that teacher any longer. And I was trying to get into the music program at the local high school. And so you had to go and audition. And so I played, and the music teacher was like, yep, that's fantastic. And yeah, my mum sort of has filled this one in as well, that the music teacher sort of was talking to, oh, you know, who's her piano teacher? Oh, she's between piano teachers at the moment because the other one's sort of retired and we haven't found a new one yet. Oh, well, we have, you know, the music program here. We've got teachers. You could bring her to the high school to have the music lessons with the music teacher that comes in here. So my mother spent a year picking me up from school on a Friday, driving me over to the high school so that I could have a 45-minute music lesson and then go back to my other school. And those times rotated through the term. So it was never the same time.
I feel for your mother.
So my poor mother did this for a whole year.
Oh.
And it took a little while, but this teacher eventually clued on to the fact that, yeah, I didn't actually practice. And so she was a little harder. But yeah, even so, I played her for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years probably. And I'm so sorry to all these people. And then, yeah, it was just sort of one of these, one year, I got a CD for Christmas. I didn't play classical. I refused to play classical. And so I was playing a lot of Billy Joel. That's another area of interest. Yeah, anyway, played a lot of Billy Joel. I got a Billy Joel live CD, Songs in the Attic. And there was this song on there, Street Life Serenade. And this piano sang. Like, it was just the most amazing sound. I think can I make the piano do that? So I had the sheet music for it, and so I got out and just started, and I taught myself to play this piece, and I played it over the summer holidays, came back for my first lesson the following year, and my teacher was just amazed, just like, you've just like jumped like 3 levels over the summer by yourself, just doing this. Like, what else can you do now? And so and it just like music just kind of clicked, because I was just trying to make the piano make this sound. And so, yeah, I practiced a bit more after that, but still it wasn't I was good at it naturally. It wasn't something that really caused me to sort of have that challenge. Coming into sort of my, year 10, year 11, I would avoid things that were tricky, because everything had come so easy up until that in all of my subjects. When things started to get hard, then I started to, well, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to do that anymore. And that sort of permeated everything. And yeah, I found it very difficult, because all of my peers had learned how to persist with things at a younger age, because things had been tricky. So they'd had to try and work these things out. Whereas I hadn't had to do that. I hadn't had to develop those skills, develop that persistence, develop that grit. And that kind of persist. And then because there's the expectation that you are already having those skills, there's no support to try and develop them. There's no recognition that you're trying to develop them. Yep. So it's like, well, you're so smart. Like, why are you having this problem? This is your problem. You're not trying hard enough. You're not doing these things. And so you're like, okay, well, then I don't want to do that. I'm not good at that. You really develop this fixed mindset in that instance. And especially when you have a label that says you are gifted, there's not always the accompanying information that goes with that, what that means. And a lot of people think they know what it means, and that it means that you are smart, and that's it. That's not what it is. There's so much else that goes in with it, and the way in which your brain works. It's just difference in the way that your brain works, the way that you work with information. And quite frequently that will result in academic performance beyond that of a person of that age. But there's other things that go with that, and that understanding is missing until we have that. We need to make sure that the children that are getting diagnosed now, they're getting that label, are getting all of the information. Because you don't say to a diabetic, hey, you're diabetic, off you go. We give them the training and how, like, what that really means and how they need to be able to care for themselves and things like that, because they are different from the norm, and they need different advice than, you know, the standard advice that's out there. And the same thing needs to apply to gifted students, that, you know, you don't give them a label and push them out the door. They need to have that understanding of what that actually means, and the people around them need to understand what that means as well. Because otherwise you're stuck there, you're floundering, you don't have these study skills, you don't have the ability to apply yourself. And it's like, well, I used to be smart, why can't I do this? You don't realize that there are, you know, a whole plethora of skills that you would just never trained in, you never had the opportunity to learn. And let me tell you that year 12 exams is not the time to try and learn them. And certainly not the time to try and synthesize them for yourself while trying to make everybody else around you think that, no, everyth's fine. You're not struggling at all, because you don't struggle. That's not a thing that you do. You're a person that knows how to do things. You are self-sufficient. You don't need that help. It's tricky. It's, you know, it's very, very difficult. And it really wasn't until I was sort of in my, you know, 1920, and I went to, I dropped out of university. I went into a diploma of interior architecture, and that did not sit well with me. I'd basically been told since I was very, very small that you are going to go to university because you're so smart. And I did not want to do that. Eventually, when I got into year 12, I'm like, oh, no, I'm going to do a correspondence course and I'll be fine. But no, I did end up going to university. But yeah, after that first year, it wasn't sticking. And then I went and did this diploma of furniture design. And in sort of doing that, I found that there were a lot of woodworking skills that, you know, these are physical, like hand skills. I did not have those, and they did not come naturally to me, but I wanted to learn them enough that it was worth going through the struggle, that it was worth persisting and learning and honing those skills. And it was the first time I'd really come up against something that I wanted to do enough that I sort of pushed through something that was difficult. You know, I came close that summer where I sort of, you know, discovered music, but yeah, this was really the first time that I'm actually going to, you know, I'm going to learn completely new skills from nothing. And that's, you know, that's where I really learned how to sort of do persistence. And then, yeah, then you have to start to apply it to things that you don't like doing. That's a bit harder again. But yeah, it's a learning process. And it took me a long time because, yeah, I had this idea and then this perception of myself as someone who, and I didn't need help. I could do it. I could manage it myself. And so, yeah, it probably took longer than it should have to sort of learn those skills.
Yeah. Oh, and obviously had, you know, a significant impact. It's like, you know, and I love that story and sharing it, and thank you, because it's like, you know, you are the lived experience of the cautionary tale that we always talk about with gifted kids. It's like they need to learn, like you say, the grit, the challenge, how to struggle, how to fail and overcome, and really learn that lesson. And I will put in the show notes a little YouTube clip that I share a lot. I think it's called James and Susie, and it's about, exactly that. It is brilliant. And it basically just says what Heather has just shared. And it's like, at some point, everyone has to learn that grit and persistence, and the skills and tools involved in going, I don't know how to do this thing. What are my options? I can persist, I can ask for help, I can research, I can
Yeah.
And everyone else learns that over and over again, you know, the whole way through primary school. But a gifted kid, like you said, doesn't hit that wall until much later. And then by then it's a massive like identity crisis, right? Because like you said, you're the smart kid, you know, you don't struggle. So you've got to figure it out by yourself while keeping everyone happy, appearing not to struggle because that's not who you are. Like, wow.
It can be really exhausting, and it's not something that you want to be doing while, you know, you're going through sort of year 12 exams. So, you know, when we took that LSAT test, there was a group of friends that I had, and so we all scored reasonably highly. But yeah, I was 3 marks clear of the next group, and those people who scored that slightly lower score, I think of the 3 that I can remember, they went on to score like perfect scores in 2 or more subjects in year 12 in their exams. And so this was it was an outstanding result. My results were nowhere near that. Which probably, you know, is owing to the fact that maybe I didn't attend quite as many classes as I might have. But, you know, this was one of these things that by the time I got to year 12, I was quite disengaged, you know, and I was phoning it in really. And so, yeah, I did not have sort of these spectacular results that, you know, my parents and my teachers were probably expecting from me. They were pretty good considering how little I studied, or like, you know, the not studying. But this was not a skill I had. I didn't know how to do that. So, you know, there was no way that I was going to study and that it was going to assist my results. So I really was just walking into the exam room completely blind and just sort of doing what I do. And yeah, I mean, the results reflect that really. And yeah, I still got accepted into university, and yeah, but then it turned out not to be for me. Although I'm back there now, so you know, could be.
Well, you know,
I was in the wrong area then. Yeah, interior architect. I should have gotten into computers. Like I was into computers as a kid, but I don't know. Maybe because I was a girl, nobody really suggested to me, "Hey, why don't you go and do the computing subjects?" That didn't happen. So, you know, I probably should have sort of gotten clued into the fact that I was a data nerd much earlier.
Well, you did get there eventually. And so I'm interested in where on the journey you started to perhaps understand your kind of experience growing up through this gifted lens. And I'm imagining maybe like many of us adults that may have happened as you've kind of learned more about your kids. Is that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So talking to other parents. So when you start to get into like that, what's going on with your kids, you then sort of you start to reach out, and you know, there was a Facebook group, and you know, this great international Facebook group, Raising Poppies, and I jumped into that and started sort of talking to people there, and I met a number of like wonderful friends who are dotted all around the globe, and this sort of narrative emerged amongst all of these parents, mostly mothers, just going, oh, actually, I'm discovering I'm gifted too. And so from that, there was a group formed for gifted adults. And so, yeah, we sort of started sort of trading our stories. And the same as with kids, you've met one gifted kid, you've met one gifted kid, you've met one gifted adult, you've met one gifted adult. They're not the same. They're all different. They will have different experiences, and you know, some things that are true of many gifted adults are not necessarily true of all of them. So, you know, we talk about sort of learning these study skills late and things like that. And that's not been everybody's experience, but it's common enough that it sort of emerges in this narrative. And you know, I mean, a group of gifted adults is the same as a group of any adults. You know, there are, you know, disagreements and schisms and all those kinds of things. And so, yes, on the internet at the moment, there are like numerous different groups for gifted adults. And yeah, I've got my favorites and the people that I get to talk to. And it's really through talking to them, talking to other gifted adults, that the story really starts to emerge. I mean, you can do all of the research, but when you actually start to talk to people who have that similar lived experience to you, that's when it really sort of hits home that, hey, this is a real thing. And, you know, you can go and read the book, The Gifted Adult, and, you know, a lot of people feel that that's really, you know, close to their hearts. That makes them feel like there's somebody who understands them. But when you actually get to go and have a conversation with these people, that's the thing that that's really interesting. And so they might have different viewpoints on things, but you can have a discussion with them about those viewpoints and really get to the nitty gritty of the details of the why they hold this viewpoint. And it's not kind of a wishy-washy, I'm not really sure. They've got a lot of detail and a lot of information about what their particular, you know, viewpoint is, and the data that backs it up. And so you can kind of trade and go backwards and forwards, and, you know, nobody's getting terribly offended that, oh no, you don't believe the same thing that I do. And, you know, you can start to have these conversations, and you learn things. You learn things from other adults, and that's not always the case as a gifted adult talking to other adults. You're not, you know, some people you talk to and you just get so much back, like it's a really rewarding conversation, and other people you don't get as much back from. And you know, you like having those juicy conversations where you get so much interaction and you get so much out of it, and, you know, both parties go away feeling like, you know, that was great, like really energized. And when you finally find that and you're having these kinds of conversations, it's, yeah, you kind of wait up, and it's not as good to sort of be having those conversations elsewhere. Yeah, that sounds really horrible.
No, look, I think that's all about finding our community, you know, finding that place where we belong, where we're meeting other people who do resonate with us. And I think a part of that is thinking, although, you know, very uniquely, as individuals in a similar way. And it's like you say, it's that detail, and it's the, you know, the commitment to the data, and you know, there are various traits, and getting the feedback and really enjoying those conversations. And I think certainly in my journey, when it came to actually finding a bunch of people, and, you know, and initially I didn't have the kind of language for that. I didn't realize, oh, I found a bunch of gifted adults and now I feel whole. It was just, that was just the reality. It's like, oh my God, I can totally talk to you. You're all cool. And we share the similar values, and I can just be myself, and I don't have to kind of pretend so much or try so hard. And it's just easier. And I think we're all kind of just looking for that sense of community, a place to belong where it's just easier. It just feels easier. And I think it's also about seeing ourselves in others. And we, you know, and it's the same for our kids. And like you said earlier, you didn't necessarily resonate with your peers as a child. Many gifted kids don't, but they still need to see themselves in other peers. You know, we all need that feedback. Otherwise we start to feel that we're wrong, broken, too different, and all of those things. And I just listening to your sort of high school experience has made me reflect on mine. And, you know, I always did well during school. I was in no way identified as anything throughout my schooling, but I did hit the sort of grade 12 in particular, and, you know, I kind of topped 2 classes, biology and art, and failed 2 classes for no other reason than just it's just like, I can do so much. I'm going to do these things over here. This other stuff I'm going to ignore. And I think as I'm kind of going through my own journey, I'm still not entirely sure what that was about, because I'd always been a higher academic achiever. But I think for me, I'm sort of unpacking, you know, being one of those adults being identified late in life, like as in 2 months ago, as both highly gifted and autistic. And now I'm kind of looking back at my life and going, oh, right. Okay. Now I might be able to put that lens over that experience and many, many others, and understand it in a different way. And I have heard that I think particularly with girls who are also autistic, that kind of getting to those upper high school years and not really kind of doing so well because, you know, there's been so much masking and accommodating and extra work going on to continue to perform acceptably in the world, let alone academically. You kind of get to that point and you go, I got nothing. And that resonates, I think, to how I was feeling at that point.
And that's a huge thing, because for girls to sort of fit into an academic, you know, to be the academic type, it's a very odd kind of situation to be in. So as gifted people, we're very aware of sort of, you know, a lot of things going. We're generally processing a lot of things that are going on around us. And so some of us are sort of focused on kind of what sort of little messages are the people around us giving us. And so we see ourselves through what we believe others' perception of us is. And so we can start to think, this person is thinking about me that, you know, I'm talking too much about, you know, things that are, you know, too intelligent, too academic. And so then you sort of start to dial back. You start to sort of, you know, pretend that maybe you're not as smart as you are. And you sort of try and act in a way that's in accordance with what people are expecting of you. And that can become very ingrained. So you're looking to sort of be the kind of person that they want you to be. You desperately want to be accepted, particularly if you haven't had those peer relationships when you're younger. You know, when you're very young, you're looking for friendships. And so not understanding what giftedness really is, you do think that you are broken. You do, and you're wanting to fix yourself so that you can have those relationships, so that you can form those friendships, so that you can have the peer group and you can go out with your friends and, you know, do all those kinds of things. And I was lucky, I suppose, in those later high school years that I did find some friends that I connected with really well. And you know, I'm still friends with some of them, you know, to this day. And, you know, I sort of go out for coffee once a week with one of them. So like, it's like we still have, I think we're closer now than we ever were in high school, but, you know, it's one of those things, like it's a very, very close relationship. But I was sort of lucky to find these friends, and I don't think they'd mind saying we were not the popular kids. We were a bit on the outer there. So it's kind of when you find your own sort of tribe of misfits and things like that, then that's sort of something that you can sort of, you know, cling on to. But we know we still had very different sort of ideas of, you know, where we were going and what we were doing. And you know, they weren't all nerds like me. So yeah, there was probably an element of, you know, I want these people to like me. I want to, you know, be that kind of person. So you do just kind of, you know, dial it down a bit, you know, maybe just sort of, you know, sneak in there and things like that. I had a lot more trouble maintaining relationships with girls than with boys. Boys, you tended to know what they were thinking, whereas girls tend to have a different idea of what was going on. So fitting in sort of socially as a girl, you know, it was different. You also, as a girl, expected not to be smart, I guess. It was, you definitely felt that there was, that the other girls felt a little bit intimidated by these things at times. And yeah, so you dial back and you do your very best just to fit in. And you develop some very intricate strategies to do that as a gifted person, because that's what you do. All of your strategies are intricate and a little bit crazy. So
why do it easy when you can do it complicated?
Exactly, because complicated must be better, right?
Well, far more interesting to execute anyway. And look, good to know that it's not just us mere mortals having these challenges, but I was reading an article today about Kate Beckinsale.
Oh, no.
Kind of, I'm really kind of feeling for her. I don't know the whole story, but it sounds like she kind of got pressured into disclosing her IQ, which was 150 something. Yeah. Obviously a very bright woman, and now she's getting all this flack for being a very bright woman. But
she's getting flack for bragging about it when she was totally pressured into calling her mum to find out what the score was, because she didn't know off the top of her head. Like, she can't win.
You can't win.
So unfair.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, yeah, and it's almost a cliche, isn't it? Intelligent women, it's like, you can't be intelligent. You inevitably get called bossy or assertive or whatever it is, but it's usually not positive, and really tricky. And I think there are a lot of adults, certainly, in the bubble I'm in, I come across, who have gifted and neurodivergent kids who go on a similar path as myself, in terms of one day something kind of resonates and then something else resonates, and then you have a major identity crisis because you realize you're autistic, fall apart, get diagnosed, and put yourself back together.
Yeah. And Dabrowski, that's
yes, a lovely demonstration of positive disintegration.
Yep.
Or the mushy caterpillar process, whatever helps.
Yeah.
And because we talk so much about our kids and the ADHD or the dyslexia or autism or whatever the flavor is, but so much of this is genetic, and we don't always look at ourselves as parents and go, oh, okay, where did they get that from? Is this something I need to, is this me? Did it skip it? It's because it's always skipped a generation, right? Yeah, I can totally see that in other relatives, but it's clearly skipped a generation, but apparently not. And I think that's just a demonstration of how much we're learning about giftedness and about all these other neurodivergencies. And it's like you said earlier, it's, giftedness is not just about being smart or high IQ. There's all this other stuff that goes along with it that we need to understand better, the sensory impacts, that lived experience through the emotional lens, sense of justice. So there's so much that's hardwired in the gifted brain. And then you add the layer of neurodiversity to that, and you get a really complicated individual who doesn't necessarily look like your classic ADHD or autistic person or whatever it might
gifty.
be. Or gifty, or dyslexic, or because there's all this compensating and masking going on. So it's complicated,
and we work so hard to not be different.
Yeah, that's right, because we just want to fit in and
feel
normal. I assumed I was normal.
Yeah, and we dial it back, and we we do some sort of, there's a lot of special pleading that goes on. There's a lot of they've said that, but that's, they've complimented me on this, but that's just because they don't really understand what it is that I've done. If they really understood it, then they'd understand that it's not as good as they think. And so you start, you do. Yeah, there's a lot of these little things, like, look,
I think imposter syndrome would be a whole other podcast. And do you know what? I was actually in my podcast, ironically, the Thursday podcast with Denise Yates, which everyone listening to this will listen to tomorrow, but
you've already recorded it
after that, right? Just to kind of mess with everyone's head. And Denise was referring to having imposter syndrome and saying she's got like affirmations and post-it notes. So I'm like, how can you have imposter syndrome?
Oh, yeah.
It's like you just got an MBE for services, you know, in education. It's like, how can you have imposter syndrome? But
I'll see if I can find it. Where is it? Can't find it. I've got here, and it's a friend, a mutual friend, told me that I needed to get it. I was invited to join the Golden Key Society, and it's for academic achievement in like university studies. And so I was invited to join while I was studying, while I had 3 children under the age of, they must have been all under 7 at that stage. And I was invited to join this, you know, this society. And I did, because there were a lot of people that I admired that were members of this society. And I'm like, hey, I want to be a part of that. But it was also, you know, maybe their standards are not like as high as I thought. Like if they're inviting me, like maybe it's not quite as high as I first thought. It's like, the university sent me a letter. It's like, you're in the top 5% of, it's like, but like, well, who are you letting into this university now? Like, you know, you start to walk it back. But and so I signed up, and a friend of mine said to me, did you get the pin? Because they offer you a little pin. And I said, no, I didn't get the pin. She's like, you need to go back, you need to go into this, and you need to get the pin, because you need to have that so that you can see it, and that you know that, no, this is something big. You did something, you achieved something that it is worth reflecting on. And so I took her advice, and I went back and I got it, and it was a bit of a journey to finally get it. But and there's a whole story that goes with that. But yes, I have possession of the pin, and you know, this is all thanks to Jessica. And so I have this pin, and I look at it, and yes, I have to remember what she told me, that yes, this is real. This is something that I achieved through hard work in very adverse circumstances, because having 3 kids under the age of 6 or 7 is no joke. And I did it.
3 gifted kids under the age of 6 or 7, because it's not like your kids are remotely complicated or complex or challenging in any way, shape or form.
I love them dearly, and
they're amazing. They're not easy, you know.
They're not easy, but
so that is a wonderful achievement. I feel like we need to kind of pause and wait so you can show us the pin.
I can't find the pin.
Well, should be taking better care of this pin.
I know, it's like, it's right here.
I think you need a big blob of blue tack and stick it on the wall behind your computer.
Look, it's hiding behind the teddy bear. There we go. So here is the pin. Have I got it the right way up? Yes, I've got it the right way up. There's the pin.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for that. And like, congratulations and well done, because we do need these reminders of things that we do. And you know, and it's like, it's not because standards were lowered, it's because we did well, you know. And that's the funny thing, right? I'll tell you this story. Oh goodness, I don't know how long ago, a couple of years ago maybe, you know, I'm researching giftedness, etc., as you do, and the Mensa UK website has a little quiz on it, and it's like, do this quiz and see if you should apply and do our test thing. I thought, or whatever. I did and I thought, all right, let's see what's going on with this quiz. Yeah. And so I did the quiz, and at the end it says, well, you've done it in, I think it was like 2 minutes, 50 seconds. There was 16 questions, but you had 12 minutes. So immediately I'm like, oh
yeah, well, I must have.
I can't have done too well then, because I've really obviously I've rushed through that. And then you click on it and it said, oh, you've got all 16 right. And so immediately I'm thought, kind of
Oh,
in that,
what is
right?
this?
They must have a really low benchmark just to encourage.
Just want people to pay the money.
Yes, right. Because what else could you possibly think having those results? Of course, it's kind of rigged to make it really easy for people.
Yeah.
And then, so as a part of my assessment process that I went through this year in terms of autism, I also did an IQ assessment, because that obviously impacts how you present when you're autistic, if you're also gifted. And so I was in the middle of what I now acknowledge was an autistic burnout. And I was also sick with a virus, as in I did these, online tests, and I'm like, now let's just do it, because, my kids have done it. I know it's just a snapshot. I'm like, I'm not getting wound up about this. Yes, I'm sick, but let's just get on with it.
Yeah.
And we went through we spent an hour doing this, and I was like, my brain was like,
whatever. Yeah.
wading through custard. I was not well. And I literally turned the computer off, laid down, and did not get up for 2 days because I was so sick. Now, if you're a mum and you actually,
that takes a lot.
You're actually not getting up, then like
Mums don't get sick days.
Right, exactly. So I was really sick, and then I get the results a while later, and it was highly gifted, and so that kind of made me think, oh, maybe I did just get all 16 questions right on the Mensa website. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, yeah, but it's like, yeah, I also made me want to kind of look at the IQ test and go, well,
what are they really testing?
Yeah,
like, it's probably because I'm just
testing?
overly familiar with the test. Like, I've done this research. Like, I probably know the answers by now.
Exactly. Like, yeah, does everyone get that test? Like, yeah. Is that correct? Can I see the data? I don't know.
Imposter syndrome strikes again.
I know. Yeah, absolutely. And it's, but yeah, it was a lot to take in.
Yeah. No, I remember being, maybe 11 or 12. And I for some reason, I had my hands on the Mensa puzzle book. Like, it was just a book of Mensa puzzles. And like, for some reason, I knew what Mensa was, obviously, my reading. And I was sort of leafing through, and I'm, doing these puzzles as a 10, 11, 12-year-old, just going through. And I was enjoying the puzzles, but I'm like, I guess I'm not Mensa material, because I can't do all of them. And it took me a really long time to realize that this is a book that was intended for Mensa members as adults to find challenging, to do themselves. And, and that it wasn't supposed to be an entry test for a 10, 11, 12-year-old.
Yeah.
It's probably okay that I didn't have all of the answers when I was a kid.
It was probably okay. Yes. Yeah. Look, it's a huge journey, and it's a complicated one, because there's so much, as Kate Beckinsale has, felt this week, there's so much baggage around being smart, and that pressure to dumb down. And I look back at my career, and even when working in government and sitting at the table with people and seeing connections, and sitting there going, no one else seems to be seeing this, I must be wrong, rather than just knowing that actually I'm really good at seeing connections that other people can't see. That's one of my strengths, and I get that now. Would have been helpful.
Back in the day,
at least I get that now, and it's kind of also figuring out, unpacking, and this is, I guess, kind of where I'm at the moment, is unpacking for myself, or what does being autistic also mean? And that's been interesting, and still very much a journey, but it's also given me a language and an understanding where I'm starting to look at my kids and go, sometimes I feel like this. Do you ever feel like that? Yeah, and we can start having
Yeah.
these conversations in a more meaningful way and really dig deeper rather than just scratching the surface of things. So it's been a really fascinating journey, which of course has required a massive deep dive into all things, you know.
Yeah. And it's not cheap either. Like, it's a very
No.
expensive journey to go on.
It is.
I sometimes sort of liken sort of being gifted to being tall. And in that, yeah, there's advantages to it. You know, if you're tall, like, you can reach stuff on the high shelves and, you know, you may be better at playing basketball. Like, there's advantages to it. But there are disadvantages that people often forget about. Like, you know, it's going to be hard to find clothes because you're taller than average, and so you need to go through these processes to find things that work for you. You're not going to drive, you can't drive any old car because you just simply can't fit into it. There are, you know, parts of daily life that are just different for a person who is of different proportion than it is for the average. And yeah, there's some advantages to it, and you know, people see that, but there's also these disadvantages which people, you know, maybe take a little bit longer to understand, but can fully acknowledge when it's explained to them. The thing is, with being gifted, you can't see it. You can see a tall person, and you don't have to have a test for that. Whereas to be gifted, you know, while you have a qualitatively different experience of life. Like, I've only seen things from inside my own head. I don't know what it's like to be a neurotypical person. So how do I know that what I'm experiencing is, you know, different from what a neurotypical person is experiencing? And my poor mother, I remember asking her about the color red when I was about 7. I'm like, you know, how do I know that what I'm seeing as red is actually red? She's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, because, you know, I call that red because you've told me that that's red. I point to that, you say that it's red, but how do I know that the way that I'm actually seeing it in my head is the same as what you see in your head? We just call it red because we point to the same thing, and that's the name that we give it. And I think I really confused her. But I've always had this kind of, you know, fascination with this, you know, is it possible that we perceive things differently? But we can never really know. And so sort of to go, in order to sort of see that it's giftedness, that is the thing that is different, you need to go through all of this testing and things like that. And we, as I know, a lot of people are able to sort of see similarities between, you know, the lived experiences of people who have been diagnosed as gifted and sort of accept that, you know, for themselves. And, you know, all credit to them. If that's something that you're able to do, that's fantastic, because so many of us sort of do that special pleading and say, oh no, that's not really me, I'm not really gifted, you know. And gifted brains are really good at making up these excuses and finding ways to cheat themselves out of that identity. So yeah, it can be quite costly to sort of go through the process of actually finding out for sure and for certain. And then even after you spend all the money, as you say, you then still doubt it. It's like, you really, like, you know, you still try and back out of it.
The easy test. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And that's entirely true. And I think that's why, you know, as I researched, you know, not just giftedness, but autism, to know more, you know, and the way that might be impacting my kids, it started to resonate for me. And like, I was having a physical and an emotional response, but my brain was like, I can't be autistic. I'm just normal. Yeah. Like, I was having a hard time wrapping around my head that I might even be gifted, let alone autistic. And that just resulted in a massive identity crisis, because it's like, but my whole life I've thought that everyone does this. You know, there's like
move the bar.
Yeah, there's this questionnaire that you do. It's called the CAT-Q, and it's you know, it's to gauge how much a person masks or hides autistic traits. And I did this questionnaire, and it's kind of like how much do you do this 1 to 10 type of a thing. And I'm like, 8, 9, 9.5. I'm like,
doesn't everyone do this?
Yeah, but this is the thing. I'm writing on this thing, which went back to my psychologist. It was like, well, doesn't everyone do that? What do you mean? What? How?
Yeah.
But doesn't everyone do that? And that? And it's like, and it's my brain is exploding, going, what do you mean everyone doesn't do this stuff? How? Yeah. What do they do? Like, what are they doing that they don't do this stuff? It was breaking me.
Yeah, and it gets really confusing when it goes back to sort of things that you were told as a child.
Yeah.
In that, having been identified as gifted when I was quite young, there was certainly that nobody wanted me to get the idea that I was, better than anyone else.
Sure,
this was
absolutely,
and it's like, that's not what giftedness is about
no.
anyway. But they were very concerned that that I might develop this idea that I was better than other people, and so it was put to me in the way that you're no different to anyone else. Yeah. And this was really confusing as a kid. You're no different to anyone else, so I'm the same as everyone else. Okay, so I'm looking around the classroom at these other kids, and they are not able to complete the work as quickly or as accurately as I can. But they're no different to me. They're the same as me. So therefore, it's not that they can't do the work, it's that they're refusing to do the work. They are lazy.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the logical conclusion that I came to was that my classmates could do as well as I could, but they were lazy. They did not want to. They were misbehaving. That is a very different idea. That's not what they were trying to communicate to me. They were trying to communicate to me that I was no better than anyone else. I didn't have greater value than anyone else. But the way in which it was communicated to me the wires got crossed. And this is the kind of thing that, happens for gifted kids. You think you're telling them one thing and you're actually telling them something entirely different, because they take you, I know that I am very, very, I will take exactly what you say. I cannot remember the word for it right now.
That's okay.
But yeah, I will take exactly what it is that you say, and
very literal.
Literal, that's the word. Yes, I'm very, very literal.
Yeah.
These words that you say go into my head, and that's exactly
what you said.
How it settles in there. And so if you say that I am, I'm no better than anyone, well, then this is the line of logic that I take. So when you're looking around, it's like all of the people around me are doing the wrong thing. Then you get I am better behaved than all of the other children. And that's the only thing that matters is, is your behavior. You're constantly told that good behavior
is true. Yep.
So therefore I was better than everyone because I was behaving better. Now, this was not what was supposed to happen. This is not how you were supposed to think. But that's the message that's going across. And so, when you're so concerned about your child perhaps, hurting the feelings of someone else, or someone else, sort of feeling less than, then, they get a very different message than you're intending. And when you focus on, when you focus on faults, because if we're working from a deficit model, but they still need to work on this or things like that. Well, then you as a child and then as an adult, focus on those faults. These are the things that I need to focus on, and you are less you're less worried about the the good stuff, and you tend not to focus on it. and that's when you need to go and get the pin, because you don't, you need to, if the people around you, if the adults in your life can't focus on the successes, the good things, the good qualities that you have, because it's going to hurt someone else's feelings, then you don't learn to be able to sort of focus on those things. You don't learn to be able to accept those levels. I'm terrible at receiving compliments. I really feel like it's very, very awkward, because how do I take this? Especially not having those good peer relationships at a young age. Like, is this person just kind of, are they messing with me? Do they not understand what it is that I've really done? Like, that they think it's better than it is? You have all of these different thoughts, and it's really difficult, and it comes from just not having that that ability to have that conversation about your successes when you're younger, I think, because everyone's so worried about, somebody else might feel bad because you've done well and you find this stuff easy, so we're just gonna we'll gloss over it. But there's real repercussions for that kind of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Unless you're good at sport, and then it doesn't matter how anyone else feels. You can just be really good and beat everyone, and that's totally okay.
I'm not good at sport. I'm not good at sport. Wheels, anything, like if it's got wheels, I'm okay. Like driving a car. I'm all right on the rollerblades.
Rollerblades. You're ace on the rollerblades. I have to say, my butt is still hurting from falling over this morning. And my knee. I'm getting knee pads. I'm getting knee pads. So look, I think this comes back to, I think what I want parents of gifted kids to know is it's about the lived experience. And it's worth digging into this. And the reason that I wanted to talk about it and share it, and especially share your journey, is because when we dig into it, we can really, we can uncover stuff which really can fundamentally shift the way we're experiencing the world and help us understand the way our kids are experiencing the world. Like, as simple as someone I knew got one of those compression tops and was talking about how that felt. And then it made me realize that, like, I used to live in the UK, and I always wore like stockings and layers, and it was always quite tight, and it felt good. And I was just sort of always thought, oh, it was just the fashion that I liked. But then I'm like, hang on, no, it was the compression.
That's
so
a sensory,
it's a sensory thing. And I've ordered one of those tops now, and I'm like really excited to get it and see if it's a thing for me, because I'm understanding my experiences through this different lens. And I've had all sorts of aha moments that has actually led to me regulating better, understanding that, and having that language now to talk to and understand my kids. It is a game changer. It's worth digging. It is not easy to confront massive identity shift, but it is worth it when you get to the other side. It is worth it 100% in terms of understanding ourselves better, and then uncovering those things that will change our lives on a daily basis, let alone the way we parent and understand our children, even just for ourselves. And I think that's the huge message. And the other message for me, and because I've done what any gifted autistic person would do, is a massive deep dive
research.
And there's an amazing book, I have talked about it before, called The Power of Different. It's actually under a pile of books there. I won't go get it. But it's amazing because it actually talks about these neurodivergent strengths. And it's like you've been talking about all along. If all we do is focus on the deficit, all we think is that there's things wrong with being and that way and having a brain like that. But the truth is there are strengths that go with it, and we can focus on those, and and they can bring a lot to our lives and what we do with our lives and the way we experience the world.
Well, that's it. When you get to step back, when you get to like relax and really be yourself with a group of people, with a team that understands you, maybe is not necessarily just like you, but is not intimidated by you, is not frightened by you, and you can let go and just be yourself. What you achieve is so much more than you could do otherwise. You put so much energy into fitting in and kind of looking after everybody else's concerns and idiosyncrasies, when you don't have to do that, when you're amongst friends who just accept you as you are, then yeah, you soar. You can do these things. It's, Csikszentmihalyi's flow state. It's fantastic. You can really like tackle big things. And so it's to be able to live and work authentically is so very important. And the first step in that is understanding that it is you yourself. You need to understand yourself first, and then find that tribe, those people that accept you, for who you are, as you are.
Yeah.
And then when you can be that authentic person, with your kids is huge. Like one of the favorite moments that I have was sitting down with my eldest and trying to explain to her why it was that I was not letting her read a particular series of books. She, at this stage, was, again, a voracious reader, as I was. And, she was really powering through content. And so her reading level was, well beyond her age. And she was wanting to read a series which I felt was not appropriate for her age. She desperately wanted to read it because some older children that she knew were reading it. And she's like, but they're reading it and I can't. And so I sort of sat down with her and I said, look, when I was a kid, I was just like you. I was reading well beyond my age, and I read everything. No one could keep up with me. People didn't know what it was that I was reading, and I'd go and borrow things and I'd read them, and it was near impossible for anybody to really keep tabs on what it was that I was reading. And so I came across things and I read things that were not suitable for my age. Now, I was very lucky in that, our brains are fantastic at protecting us from things that we are not ready to read. And so I felt that I had comprehended what I had read, but when I reread the book a bit later, it was like, in my 20s, it's like, oh, that was really not appropriate for a 13-year-old to be wow, no, that was not good. But but I had read it and I still understood, some of that content. And if I'd really sort of dug into it, it, could have had some effects. And so, I really, feel that for you, the best thing is that you don't, read, ahead. We'll find you some books that are dealing, that are at your reading level, but, maybe dealing with some different subject matter, because I don't think this is appropriate for you at this stage. And she looked at me and she said, Mum, are you gifted too? And I suddenly realized that, somehow this had been missed from the conversation. I said to her, well, yeah. She leapt across the couch, wrapped her arms around my neck and just gave me this big hug and says, I love you, because, she felt that connection, there was somebody like her.
Yeah.
That was that in her, even in her family, there was someone like her. And so it wasn't just that, it wasn't just that she was gifted, it was that, I was gifted as well, and that I understood her.
Yeah.
I knew, and so that was good for her to understand.
Yeah.
So yeah, like,
it's a very powerful conversation. Yeah.
Tell your kids they're gifted, and if you're gifted, tell them that you're gifted too, and that it's okay. It's okay to be gifted.
Yeah, exactly. What a wonderful episode. Thank you so much for joining me and talking about being a gifted adult and all the things that entails. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I felt very strongly that in this week of podcasts, I really wanted to have a story, you know, a lived experience story, because I think it helps to hear other people talk about their journeys, you know, so that it can resonate with us and we can kind of go, right, something to look into. So thank you so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. It's been good fun.
It has.